A right-handed match between Devon LARRATT and Denis CYPLENKOV is something we wanted to see for years and years. Probably most of us thought it would never happen. And then finally, at East vs West 10, it happened. And this match officially answered the age-old question of who was truly the stronger arm wrestler between Devon and Denis. Or did it? In the same way that the 2018 left-handed match seemed inconclusive, the 2023 right-handed match also had its limitations. In 2018, Devon was clearly not at his peak form. He had a mop on his head and, well, it's left-handed, so who cares? And in 2023, Denis was clearly not in his peak form. Both athletes had reasonable excuses in both matches. So, in 2024, the question remains: who would win in an arm wrestling match? Peak Devon LARRATT or peak Denis CYPLENKOV? In this video, we will take a look at both pullers' advantages and disadvantages going into this hypothetical matchup. But firstly, we need to establish when each arm wrestler's peak took place. For Denis CYPLENKOV, I tend to consider his peak to be around the 2018 era. This is when Denis hit most of his impressive numbers in the gym on lifts that translate well to arm wrestling, and according to the super scientific poll I created on this channel, most of you guys agree with me. And with Denis, things are just easier as he had a pretty steady progression throughout the years, so we'll go with the 2018 version of Denis. But with Devon, things get a little bit trickier. If you ask someone when Devon LARRATT's prime was, there are multiple valid options. The issue with Devon is that he did not just have a steady linear progression, he had huge ups and downs in his career. There were multiple eras where Devon was on top or close to the top, but these eras were heavily influenced by Devon's current injuries or lack thereof. Some people consider Devon's peak to be 2008 when he defeated Brzenk. In 2008, Devon looked super clean. He could arm wrestle in any style he wanted, but if you had to pick his ace move, it was probably his high hook. It's pretty crazy to see Devon just hold the monstrous Richard Lubke's center table like he's brand new to the sport. And then you have the most recent version of Devon, whose ability to take hand control was off the charts. However, his ability to high hook and implement more traditional forms of arm wrestling just isn't the same as it once was. Devon has accumulated so many injuries over the years that he is a totally different competitor. But once again, my super scientific poll puts Devon's prime in 2024, so we're gonna go with that one. Basically, we will be putting the version of Devon who faced Levon up against the version of Denis who crushed Devon in 2018. Now that we've established who we are talking about, let's talk about advantages and disadvantages. Firstly, Denis CYPLENKOV has some of, if not the strongest elbow flexors in the history of arm wrestling. As we know, Denis set world records in both the strict curl and in rocking back pressure. Of course, both of these records have been broken since then, but the technique used by modern athletes is different than Denis's technique. Most people consider Denis's variation of both strict curl and back pressure to be a more difficult variation of these lifts as compared to what we normally see today. Additionally, Denis's structural integrity makes him quite the arm wrestler in ugly positions. Denis can top roll without his wrist, he can jump into a flop press, jump back, it doesn't matter. He can pull from any position and he never stops. One major difference between today's Denis and prime Denis is explosivity. Back in the day, Denis used to be very explosive. He would blast sideways Todd Hutchings style without his wrist and jump behind his hand impressively quickly considering his size. Denis's biggest disadvantages are his wrist integrity and his technique. Although Denis's biceps are insane, he doesn't really have the cupping to go with it. Denis has been known to lose his cup throughout his career, and even close to his peak, this was still an issue for him. Now, this probably has more to do with the thickness of his hands rather than his forearm strength, but the problem is still the same on the table. And of course, Denis's technique probably isn't ideal for going up against someone like Devon. Denis is known for taking a super low grip on his opponent's wrist. He basically starts matches in a dad move the majority of the time. By doing this, he is increasing the odds of getting the match into a hook, but he is also surrendering the high ground as well as a significant amount of leverage. Okay, now let's talk about Devon. Devon's most clear advantage is his pronation. Devon's pronation is probably the best pronation in arm wrestling except for Levon. Devon's pronation is so good that he was able to take hand control from Zirakashvili in their most recent match, and I would consider Levon the most difficult opponent to take hand control from. Additionally, Devon's technique is quite possibly better than anyone else's. He's been pulling for 100 years and is a master of the setup. Pairing this up against Denis's tendency to low grip his opponents, Devon can pretty much get whatever grip he wants. And although Devon's inside game may not be what it once was, he still has those options available to him and can use them when he needs to. These options become especially effective later into the match once Devon's opponent is beginning to tire. As for disadvantages, Devon doesn't have the strongest arm. And since we're talking about arm wrestling, this is obviously kind of important. Devon is known for not having the craziest side pressure or bicep power. What Devon has is much more sport specific as opposed to overall strength. Now that we've looked at strengths and weaknesses, let's talk about the match itself. What exactly would this match look like if it were possible? This is what I think. For this match, we're going to imagine a 5-round format. Devon and DENIS don't fight very much for a grip, as DENIS simply allows Devon to have everything he wants. DENIS with the low grip, Devon with the high knuckles. The ready go happens, Devon cracks DENIS's wrist back as DENIS hits sideways and back. Although Devon has taken hand control and DENIS is underneath a little bit, DENIS starts blasting sideways even without hand control. Because he is comfortable doing this without hand control, this gives him access to isolate Devon's bicep with his side pressure. Devon's bicep is unable to withstand DENIS's side pressure hits. Devon does have full hand control, but he becomes more and more separated from his arm. Having started off in an open top roll, he is eventually forced into a full king's move, and DENIS is in a very awkward looking flop wrist top roll. DENIS continues to hit down toward the pin pad, but he can't quite finish. Eventually, he jumps behind his arm and is able to press for the win. Round 1 is over, but now DENIS's wrist has been completely blown out. Devon switches techniques, he now goes for the high hook instead of the open top roll. DENIS sees that Devon is now coming forward and tries to go inside with him. But upon the go of the match, DENIS is stuck in no man's land. He can't get his wrist bent to force the hook, but he also is unable to match Devon's shoulder commitment. The only thing DENIS has access to is flop wrist side pressure. DENIS drives hard to the side, but Devon's angle is cutting into DENIS's bicep. DENIS just doesn't have a lane to access his strength. DENIS is stuck in the center table, his bicep is isolated, and eventually he is pressed to the pad. Rounds 2 through 4 are basically a repeat of round 2, and Devon takes the super match 3-1, but not without significant difficulty. DENIS was the stronger athlete, but because Devon has multiple high-level moves, he was able to win the battle of efficiency and gas DENIS out over time. And there you have it. That's what I think prime Devon versus prime DENIS would look like. All things considered, I do think it would end up looking quite a bit like the East versus West 10 match that we saw. The biggest difference is that DENIS would be a little bit stronger and he would be way faster and way more explosive. So Devon wouldn't be able to use the same strategy he used at East versus West 10, but I think DENIS would still lose hand control and eventually this would lead to his loss of efficiency. But let me know how you guys think this match would go, because I do think that it would be a very close match and it really could go either way. But at the end of the day, regardless of who you think would win this match, one thing is for certain. DENIS pulled Devon's whole body with table in Left Arm 2018.